what if learning academics, mathematics, reading literature, learning how to express ourselves in writing, and all the rest, what if learning academics were a stress-free process which causes children to grow into happy and confident people who know how to manage their own time and believe in themselves and their abilities and are eager to engage and interact with the rest of the world? We started our successful homeschool experiment 6 years ago because the fancy private schools we were sending our kids to were not going to prepare them for a competitive college in the United States. We live in San Luis Potosi, Mexico, near the town my wife, Judith, grew up in. I'm from Chicago and graduated from Cornell University in 1987. And I insist that my children have the same educational opportunities that I had. Right at the beginning of our homeschool journey, I realized that I couldn't supervise their learning the way a school teacher does. My wife, Judith, and I have a business to run. We simply don't have the time to teach a home learner from 8:30 to 3 in the afternoon, 5 days a week. And I suspect that most of you can't either. We can't use the same methods. At school, a teacher controls the learning process. They supervise the process every step of the way. They provide learning materials, books, worksheets. They give instruction. They teach to the children. Learning at school is a social activity. There are social cues that keep everybody on track and keep everyone in line. And of course, in the end, there's a grade, an evaluation. At home, we had to figure out who's going to be in charge of the learning process because there isn't a teacher there. And Judith and I, we can't do this because we have to work. So the only person who's available to teach, for instance, to teach our oldest son, Daniel, the only one who's there the entire learning process is Daniel. Well, so why not just make him in charge of the learning process? It makes sense in retrospect. It took us a little while to figure out that that was even an option. Of course, at first, he didn't know how to teach himself. He hadn't become empowered to do this. And in my blog, I explain in detail how our children did become empowered learners. And I hope that if you're interested, that you'll be able to see how to teach your children how to teach themselves, to empower them to learn. Mind you, this did not happen overnight. In fact, it took a few months for this method to start taking hold and almost a year to completely make the transition to an independent, self-directed, self-motivated, active and engaged learner. It's a mouthful. The effect has been profound, not only in their academic attainment, but it's affected all of their non-academic achievements and their very sense of self. I'll give you a few examples. I don't want to turn you off by bragging about my own children. Of course, I think that they're great, typical father. But all three speak English, Spanish, and French perfectly. They speak, read, listen, and write. Even our 12-year-old. That's only one of their accomplishments. What really speaks well of them isn't what they've achieved, it's how they've achieved it. They weren't asked to learn, or they weren't shepherded through a learning process. They chose to learn. Of course, we created the right environment for learning, but I didn't teach to them. They chose to learn. And this is a very important distinction. I mean, maybe the educational attainment isn't that different, but the field that they have and the relationship that they have to their learning material is very different. And this is an important distinction. They took control of the process. For instance, our oldest, Daniel, when he understood how to take control of the learning process, he was able to learn how to play piano. He's become quite an accomplished amateur pianist. He's teaching himself calculus by himself. In the end, he'll get a 5 on the APBC test, the same as everyone else who puts in the necessary time. But it's not the same to be taught to as to have to try to figure it all out and to have the satisfaction of knowing that he can figure it out by himself. He's capable of that. Our youngest, Sarah, just turned 12. She took control of her learning process to learn how to paint, to garden, and last week she learned how to divide a fraction by another fraction. This might not seem like a great accomplishment. She finds learning math more difficult than learning a new language, which I find interesting. But she stuck with the math concept that was difficult for her until she got it. And so again, she was in control of the learning process and had the satisfaction to know that she can do this. If she sticks with it, she can get it. Our 16-year-old Aaron is a champion athlete. He trains Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu 20 hours a week. That's a lot of time. He's still, ahead of his grade level in academics. And he's able to find all of this time for sports and keep up with all his studies because he's learned how to manage his own time. He still had enough time, between training jiu-jitsu and everything else to teach himself Portuguese. I just shake my head at that one. I don't understand completely what possessed him to learn an entire language on his own simply because his Brazilian jiu-jitsu teacher gave him some instructional videos in Portuguese. He wanted to be able to understand them. So he taught himself Portuguese. Also, he wanted to be able to talk to some champion Brazilians who, some black belts who were visiting, and they spoke Portuguese. So, he decided he would too. And he learned this all by himself. He thinks that when he finishes growing up, he'd like to be a sports commentator because he thinks he has an edge because not everyone can simultaneously translate between English, Portuguese, Spanish, and French. Good for Aaron. Daniel, the oldest, he started paid work as a language teacher at 17. The director of the Language Institute where he teaches was not looking to hire a kid for cheap. Daniel earns the same as a local high school teacher would. He was able to get the job because he told the school director that he already had 5 years of experience teaching himself. And that's harder than teaching somebody else. He says that he's going to start a language school to pay for his college. Again, good for Daniel. I want you to think about how different this process is than what happens in a normal school where the teacher controls the learning process and teaches to the children. This isn't the same. The process is different. The results are different. There isn't anything special about my kids' abilities. What sets them apart is how they have empowered themselves to learn. They know that they can control this process. And if they can learn a language, advance math, become a musician, gardener, write coherent essays, or become a champion athlete, I ask, what can't they learn? What can't they do? They've given themselves permission to learn and do anything. So I told you some of what my kids have learned, but you tell me, what would your kids choose to learn and do if they were empowered? Do you know? Do your children know? Or are they waiting for someone to come and teach to them or to choose them for a special program? My kids are not waiting. They're on their way. I hope you see how this method of learning also teaches confidence and a belief in oneself. They know that difficult things take more time to learn than easy ones. They just have to stick with it. When they fall down, just get up again. If they need some help, they ask someone whom they respect and trust, me, someone else, for help. In taking control and assuming responsibility for themselves, they're actually happier because they don't get told what to do. The parents don't tell them what to do. That makes us parents happier, lets us off the hook. Win-win situation there. They've been given self-agency because they make their own decisions during their studies, which is something most school children don't ever get to do. They're told what to do and at what time. But these children are in control of their studies and to a large extent in control of their own lives. Empowered to learn, they've empowered themselves for life. Right? What a gift. So if you're homeschooling your children because you choose to, or struggling with distance learning because of COVID-19, I encourage you to consider empowering your children to learn by themselves instead of trying to recreate school at home and teach to them. Let them know that they can take control of the learning process and take control of their own lives. It's one of the most important lessons that they can ever learn, and they can learn it while doing their schoolwork. Think about it.